Hi there, I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. And I offer this devotion as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit, and for the soul. And it's titled, Happiness is a Spirit that Visits Us. But how do we speak of it? And I'm going to begin with a rather wonderful poem, So Much Happiness by Naomi Shihab Nye. It is difficult to know what to do with so much happiness. With sadness, there is something to rub against, a wound to tend with lotion and cloth. When the world falls in around you, you have pieces to pick up, something to hold in your hands, like ticket stubs or change. But happiness floats. It doesn't need you to hold it down. It doesn't need anything. Happiness lands on the roof of the next house singing and disappears when it wants to. You are happy either way. Even the fact that you once lived in a peaceful treehouse and now live over a quarry of noise and dust cannot make you unhappy. Everything has a life of its own. It too could wake up filled with possibilities of coffee cake and ripe peaches, and love even the floor which needs to be swept, the soiled linens and scratched records. Since there is no place large enough to contain so much happiness, you shrug. You raise your hands and it flows out of you into everything you touch. You are not responsible. You take no credit as the night sky takes no credit for the moon, but continues to hold it and share it, and in that way be known. I was recently asked by a member of the Urmston congregation that I serve, a lady called Mary. She wanted me to explore happiness during a common search for meaning group, that like a monthly engagement group we hold, and she wanted to do it on the subject of happiness. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't quite sure where to begin. Where do you begin? How do you talk about happiness? What on earth is this thing, if it is such a thing, that we call happiness? Happiness, there must be more happiness. As Naomi Shihab Nye wrote in that wonderful poem, with sadness there is something to rub against. It is easy to speak of sadness. It feels embodied. There is a deep weight, a heaviness to sadness. It has a power that feels like it's pushing you, weighing you down to such a degree that sometimes just to raise your head can feel impossible when weighed down by sadness. The sadness can feel so locked in that no happiness could possibly break through. There's a real thick heaviness to sadness, but happiness, no, very different. Happiness is more of a willow the wisp, like a little sprite. It seems to come and go almost unbidden, out of our control. All you can do with happiness, according to Nye at least, is to simply shrug, raise your hands, take no credit. It comes unbidden. Happiness seems to lack a body, a weight. It's hard to put your finger on it, is it not? Because it's not a static state of being. It seems impossible to name it. And how on earth do we talk about it? It goes against the grain of our modern materialistic, bound age. How on earth do we talk of happiness, happiness? How do we speak of happiness? I'm reminded here of something I once read by Henry Nouwen on why it's so much easier to speak of our troubles than it is to speak of our joy or happiness. And it seems it's not just a British thing, is it? Nouwen wrote of his university days. I vividly remember how one of my university teachers spoke for a whole year about anxiety in human life. He discussed in great detail the thoughts of Kierkegaard, Sartre, Heidegger and Camus, and gave an impressive expose of the anatomy of fear. One day during the last month of the course, a few students found the courage to interrupt him and ask him to speak a little about joy before the course was over. At first he was taken aback, but then he promised to give it a try. The next class he started hesitantly to speak about joy. His words though sounded less convincing and penetrating than when he spoke about anxiety and fear. Finally, after 2 more meetings, he told us that he'd run out of ideas about joy and would continue his interrupted train of thought. This event made a deep impression on me, especially since I had such great admiration for my teacher. I kept asking myself why he was unable to teach about joy as eloquently as he had taught about anxiety. And it's the same with happiness, I think. We have no trouble describing our sadness, what is wrong, what sickens us as individuals and as society. Nouwen observed there are far more words for sickness than for health, more for abnormal conditions than for normal conditions. When my leg hurts, my head aches, my eyes burn or my heart stings, I talk about it, often in elaborate ways. But when I'm perfectly healthy, I have little, if anything at all, to say about those parts of my body. You don't even notice them. Think about the word resentment itself. It comes from resente, which literally means to re-feel something. Now, when we re-feel something, a memory from our past, it doesn't have to be painful. It's not always so, is it? It can be very joyful, actually. It can make us happy. And yet, the word resentment now only has a negative connotation. We don't re-feel these, or we don't have a word to describe re-feeling these beautiful and positive feelings. We only have a word that talks about the unhappy, unpleasant feelings, the re-feeling anger, I guess. There's no word for re-feeling happiness and joy. Why is that? Please don't misunderstand. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not for one moment suggesting that we ought not to talk about our troubles. Of course not. My word, we all have them. Whether that's our personal troubles, whether our health, whether physical, emotional, mental or spiritual, whether our families, our communities or our wider world, which no doubt troubles us all. It certainly troubles me. We all live with fears and anxieties and pain brought to us due to our daily sufferings and concerns. I've got plenty myself. In fact, it's good to talk about them because sharing our troubles often helps us connect with one another, and through this we find a freedom, actually, I think, that allows us to live again, to be free. But we do need to be careful not to become weighed down, tethered, enslaved by these pains and these struggles. So much so that that's all our lives become. It's all we ever talk about. We don't even notice any happiness and joy. I was out on a Monday morning walking through Altrincham with Molly towards Stamford Park. I probably begin my week 9 times out of 10 this way. I left the house with a variety of troubles, things on my mind, concerns about the communities I serve and the people in my community, my own family, folk close to me, worries about the wider world, external to me, both in this land and, of course, conflicts in other places. Real worry and concern for people. Of course I have. There'd be something wrong with me if I didn't. As I wandered through town, I watched folk and I felt a sense of connection to them. Already I began to transcend these worries. I was also thinking about this subject of happiness. How on earth am I going to talk about it? Begins at the beginning of the week, of course. Said hello to a few folk. We exchanged pleasantries, called in at the coffee shop, chatted with the manager there, the usual Monday conversation. As I was walking further through the town towards the park, a woman called Angela Fowler came into my mind. Angela had been a wonderful member of the Altrincham congregation for so many years, died a couple of years ago. What a wonderful person she was, and an example of someone who lived with many struggles in life and yet lived with this real sense of joy and happiness. She sang the joy of living in all its mystery. There was this sense of real gratitude about her, I guess. She was one of those people who was genuinely pleased for others and their successes too. She had such a wonderful quality about her. She exuded this spirit. Me and Molly enjoyed our time in the park. I enjoyed watching folk exercising and young parents with babies and preschool children. I spoke with a few folk and enjoyed the dogs playing together the way that dogs delightfully play. They flirt and play, it's really funny. They're just naturally free and happy. I was watching some Labradors playing and there's something about the way Labradors and Spaniels frolic and play and wrestle and roll around together. Just utter abandonment and joy. I got lost in the moment of their play, and as I did, I was visited by the spirit of happiness. I felt free and I felt happy. It was a beautiful, beautiful time. I walked home smiling to myself. Ideas were starting to form in my mind. This that's coming now, obviously I'm talking about exactly that now. As I started to walk home, I passed a woman I talk to and see from time to time. She has this tiny Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. And he's had some real health troubles. They often have heart troubles. This one nearly died a couple of years ago. But he's doing well, and she tells me, and it was so delightful to see such happiness on her face as she spoke of her dear, sweet little dog. As I walked away from her, I felt that spirit of happiness taking over me. I reached the crossing where we press the button and wait. Molly doesn't cross till it beeps. And then I heard my name called out, and I looked and saw Rosemary Donaldson, somebody from the Altrincham congregation, as she approached me. She began telling me about what she was up to and things that I did, and we spoke for a while. And then she said in a very serious voice, which Rosemary can have, that how much she missed Angela Fowler. She'd been thinking about her. She'd been such an inspiration to her. In fact, it was through Angela she became connected to the Unitarians. And I told Rosemary that I'd just been thinking of Angela that morning myself. And we spoke for quite some time about Angela. And as we did, I could feel that spirit of happiness working through me. And I walked home with the biggest beaming smile. And then I got down to doing some work. Enough gallivanting around Altrincham that day already. Got some work done. And as I began to work, I thought of what I've witnessed, the happiness in folk. Over the last few days, actually, I've been kept seeing these moments of happiness. People lost and absorbed in what they were doing. And as they were absorbed in whatever their love, their passions, this spirit of happiness had taken them over. I thought of the Mayor's civic reception I'd been invited to say a grace at the Friday before. Very moving evening, actually, listening to people share their stories of their struggles, particularly of those who have suffered with ME for many, many years. Very moving, really connected with them. And I enjoyed experiencing a variety of talented people, mainly young people actually, sharing their artistic gifts. I observed them lost in their work, and as they were lost in their work, I could see the spirit of happiness visiting them as they shared their work with others. It was a strange evening in some ways. There were tables full of people in all their finery. All the mayors of Greater Manchester from all the boroughs were there. And then people sharing their gifts and people talking and little old me in the middle of all that, wondering, how did I get here? Once in a lifetime comes to mind. How did I get here? But I was happy to be part of it. Although there was a little bit of imposter syndrome going on. Yeah, I thought to myself, how did I end up here? And then this smile came over my face as I was visited by happiness, that little spirit. It woke up in me, that great mystery of life, happiness. Here's another poem, Happiness by Jane Kenyon. There's just no accounting for happiness or the way it turns up like a prodigal who comes back to the dust at your feet, having squandered a fortune far away. How can you not forgive? You make a feast in honour of what was lost, and take from its place the finest garment which you saved for an occasion you could not imagine, and you weep night and day to know that you were not abandoned, that happiness saved its most extreme form for you alone. No, happiness is the uncle you never knew about, who flies a single-engine plane onto the grassy landing strip, hitchhikes into town and inquires at every door until he finds you asleep mid-afternoon, as you so often are during the unmerciful hours of your despair. It comes in the monk in his cell. It comes to the woman sweeping the street with a birch broom, to the child whose mother has passed out from drink. It comes to the lover, to the dog chewing a sock, to the pusher, to the basket maker, and to the clerk stacking cans of carrots in the night. It even comes to the boulder, in the perpetual shade of pine barrens, to rain falling on the open sea, to the wine glass, weary of holding wine. Happiness comes. It's not something you attain. Happiness comes. But you can make yourself available, I guess. No, I don't think happiness is something you can pursue, something you can catch hold of and grab and own. The foundation of the American Republic is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I don't think that's the right objective in life. It seems a bit self-centered, actually, and if it's not fully achieved, then folks are just left with a sense of dissatisfaction and envy, because you can never get enough. I suspect that if what your aim in life is to feel happy, you will rarely achieve it if that's what you're aiming for. And if you do, then your whole focus will be just on maintaining that happiness that you've got, for fear of if you let go, it'll be gone for good. You can't. I don't think it's possible. Yes, we ought to live the good life, the worthy life, the meaningful life as the great philosophers teach. But happiness ought not to be the aim itself, only the product of living the right way, this loving way. When I think of Angela, she seems to be an example of someone who did. She had her struggles, but she knew happiness. You could see it. And happiness in others, there's something about that, I think. Because if you're pursuing just happiness for yourself, it becomes a self-centered mission, and probably one that can't be attained. It comes unbidden. And maybe the key actually is to savour the experiences of being alive and to share these moments with others. Maybe this is where we're visited by that spirit. It's certainly when I've been visited by it. It's when I feel most free and alive. And it's been visiting me quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, despite the very real worries and concerns that at the same time can weigh me down. But then suddenly the spirit lifts me and it sets me free. And I'm happy. I live in the real world though, and the real world concerns me greatly. I carry the same worries everybody else carries. I awake each day with the same dilemma that E.B. White wrote about when he said, "It is hard to know when to respond to the seductiveness of the world and when to respond to its challenge. If the world were merely seductive, that would be easy. If it were merely challenging, that would be no problem. But I arise in the morning torn between the desire to improve the world and the desire to enjoy the world. This makes it hard to plan the day." Maybe you don't plan the day. Maybe you prepare for the day. Make yourself open to the greater feelings and do the right things, I guess. And it comes or it doesn't. I know I can't save the world, but that doesn't mean I avoid it. Instead, I do what I can. I put my whole self in, and in so doing, I am visited by all kinds of spirits. But sometimes by the spirit of happiness, as I am now. Not constantly, but when I let myself go and give myself fully to whatever I am doing, the spirit visits me, and the spirit sets me free, as it is meant to. And this makes me happy. And this is the best way I know to speak of what it means to be happy. It's the best I've got for you. I hope that helps. If it doesn't help, maybe brings a smile. But I'm going to end with a bit of wisdom from the late great Mary Oliver. And it's about a moment of happiness that changed her life. Here she describes being visited by that sprite, that little sprite of happiness. And she puts the experience in such a beautiful way. You see, Mary savoured this life, despite the very, very real struggle she faced. And she found a way to share her experiences of this incredible life that we're given. It comes unbidden. And as a result of this, Mary knew happiness, and others experienced it through her gifts too. What other way is there to live? This is what we're meant to do, I think, with our wild, wonderful life, perhaps. Maybe that's answering one of Mary's questions there. Maybe not. Who knows? Anyway, here's what Mary so wonderfully wrote in her essays, in Long Life and other essays. Essays and other writings, sorry. Here's Mary. Once years ago, I emerged from the woods in the early morning at the end of a walk, and it was the most casual of moments. As I stepped from under the trees into the mild, pouring down sunlight, I experienced a sudden impact, a seizure of happiness. It was not the drowning sort of happiness, rather the floating sort. I made no struggle toward it. It was given. Time seemed to vanish. Urgency vanished. Any important difference between myself and all other things vanished. I knew that I belonged to the world and felt comfortably my own containment in the totality. I did not feel that I understood any mystery, not at all. Rather that I could be happy and feel blessed within the perplexity. The summer morning, its gentleness, the sense of the great work being done through the grass where I stood scarcely trembled. As I say, it was the most casual of moments, not mystical as the word is usually meant, for there was no vision or anything extraordinary at all, but only a sudden awareness of the citizenry of all things within one world. Leaves, dust, thrushes and finches, men and women. And yet it was a moment I have never forgotten, and upon which I have based many decisions in the years since. What do we do with so much happiness? We enjoy it when it comes. It may not visit for long. And I'm going to end with some words of blessing. You know, we need to bless more, and we can all bless. We bless by giving ourselves wholeheartedly to life. So let's step out into the world once more. Let's not seek the narrow path that avoids the wilderness. Let's instead walk in faith, hope, courage and love along love's broad highway and experience all that life has to offer to us. Let's be awakened to those visits of that little sprite, that little willow the wisp, the spirit of happiness. And may we carry this vision with us, and may we do so in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, and in all that we do. Ta-ta. Amen.